be appreciated. Otherwise, stay muted and chat with us using the chat, sending your questions to this very new webinar, which we are about to launch today on strategic heating and cooling planning. Today, in its second edition, focusing on data as key drivers in your decision-making processes. My name is Carsten Rothballer. I'm working for ICLEI Europe, and I will have the pleasure to moderate this session together with my colleague, Julian.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this second session of the ActionHeat training. We are happy to be with all of you here today. I'm going to drive you through the agenda now. Well, as you can see, we are having first a welcome and introduction to the session. Then we will have some insights from last session. So in case you couldn't attend, you will have a little overview, and if you attended, a little refreshing. Then we will have Lucas Kranz talking about the Hotmaps tool, an analysis of heat and cold demands and renewable potentials. Then we have Adit Maya talking about the acquisition of local and regional data for inventories and potentials. And then we will have in the end an interactive discussion and closing with the questions from the audience, but please feel free to post any questions during the whole session. So thank you all for being here, and Carsten, the floor is yours again.
Yes, thank you, Julian. So within this webinar, you have already seen from the first session, we address the strategic heating and cooling. And we have developed a workflow accordingly as part of onHeat, which shall describe and shall take you on a capacity building journey concerning its policy aspects, its city planning aspects, as well as execution. In the last training session, we looked very much on the vision and commitment of cities towards strategic heating and cooling planning. We touched upon how to build internally a heating and cooling working group. And in today's session, we will focus very much on the technical details, on data, in particular here on the step of inventories and potentials. Then eventually to come, next slide, please, we will also, along the course, enter into other aspects using Hotmaps today in focus, but next time also firm is looking at project feasibility issues, which is part of another cycle of decision-making here for strategic heating and cooling.
Okay, thank you, Carsten. So now let's dip directly into the last session overview. I would ask all participants to please access Slido, either in your phones or in your browser, and put in the event code that you see here. You can access the questions. Let me for 1 minute stop sharing, but you will see the code now again. Don't worry. Let me open it. Okay. Okay. Do you all see now the link and the code, right? Hope so. So let's get the slider started. Hoping you could get in. So we would like to ask you here to name a city you know it's committed to strategic heating and cooling planning. Any city you can have around your area or that you know because you worked in some projects. Also, in the last session, we mentioned a couple of cities committed to strategic heating and cooling planning. You might remember them. Okay. I don't see people have access yet. Maybe they need the link again.
It's also in the chat, so feel free to just copy.
Yeah, please. Oh, wait, apparently there's some problem here. Sorry, everybody. Okay, now it should be active. Is it working for everyone? Yes, good. Some technical problems always happens. Okay, so Freiburg, well, we are based in Freiburg, so happy to hear that city. Frankfurt, Hamburg, Baden-Baden, all it's most German cities right now. Bristol. Apparently Baden-Baden is very committed to strategic heating and cooling. Good to know. Then I'm gonna remind you in last session, we shared examples of Helsinki and Mannheim also as good examples of a strategic heating and cooling planning. Vienna, good to know. Okay, so thank you for your answers. Now let's get into the next question maybe. We have here this question, which of these tactics was not mentioned in the last session as part of an engagement strategy? You might not remember this, but you can just bet. And then this way we can refresh a bit about engagement strategies in strategic heating and cooling planning. We have already one vote for door-to-door visits. Everybody's apparently voting that option. And I have to say that you are right. This wasn't mentioned. You have very good memory or very good luck. But yeah, this is not an option that was mentioned. However, we must say that it could be useful in certain cases. For example, in small communities, it can be also very engaging, the door-to-door visits, so to be considered. And finally, what do European cities consider the most important objective in the heating and cooling planning? The increase of transparency, the CO2 neutrality, affordability of supply of heating and cooling, or implementation of measures. This is according to a meta study that was developed also by Fraunhofer as part of the last session, you might remember. Okay, I see several bets here, and I have to say that the winner here is CO2 neutrality. That's what most municipalities indicated that they considered as the most important objective. So I see you are all very well attentive in the sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then we come to one element which we also wanted to share, which you had appetite for. Indeed, you wanted to get certified. Some of you, when registering, have clicked. We made that available and would like to make that also happening if you wish so. So as part of this webinar series of 3 training sessions, you can get a small certificate. And by that, of course, you need to do something, either in a short, quick version or in a more advanced, elaborate version using Hotmaps as a tool. So we have prepared a little exercise, either short or advanced for you, which is accessible on our website, onHeat or actionheat.eu. The link is also posted. Materials, in any case, will always be present on our website, so you can access it. These exercises shall be sent to us on the 30th of March. We will scan them, we will evaluate them, and some of the proposed areas which we are going to, which you are proposing for applying, for instance, Hotmaps or applying Thermos, we can then also further take a look in the call for applications in the actual support that we are offering to more than 120 municipalities throughout Europe. So having said that, over to the first speaker, Lucas Ganz from the TU University, Technical University of Vienna, talking about the analysis of heat and cold demands in renewable potentials with the free online tool Hotmaps.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carsten, for this introduction. I just need a minute to start the presentation. So I think you should see now the presentation.
Yes,
indeed, in the coming 15 to 20 minutes, I want to give you a quick overview of the Hotmaps tool. In my presentation, I want to quickly explain how Hotmaps can be used for strategic heating and cooling planning. What is the Hotmaps database and toolbox? Then go quickly through a live demonstration, and then also show a bit more details on the exercises that Carsten just mentioned. So, strategic heating and cooling planning. You already have seen this figure before, this overview of different elements and components which need to be followed in the heating and cooling planning process. And the question is, how can Hotmaps now support here? And one very essential point is Hotmaps can support in the inventory and potentials. You will see afterwards that Hotmaps can support in terms of the inventory of heat demand, but also potentials of renewable heating sources. Furthermore, Hotmaps has calculation modules where for example, zones, areas suitable for district heating can be identified, which then can be also used for zoning policies. Hotmaps can be used to develop scenarios of heat demand, of the transition of the heating sector in a certain area. And by that, by this process of developing scenarios can also support the development of heating and cooling transition strategies. So what is Hotmaps? Hotmaps is a toolbox to support public authorities, energy agencies, and planners in strategic heating and cooling planning at local, regional, and national level, and in line with EU. The toolbox was developed in the Horizon 2020 project Hotmaps, which was completed actually already in September 2020, but we have several follow-up activities ongoing, among others, onHeat. The toolbox is fully open source. It was developed in a large consortium of scientific partners, but also, and that's very important for us to mention, together with the target group. So we had a number of pilot areas, cities included in the consortium, and they helped us also to frame the tool in a direction that is really helpful for their purposes. The tool is compatible and adaptable in principle for entire EU27, which means there is default data available for the whole EU27 plus UK actually. And I will come back to that also regarding the usability and the credibility of the default data. As I already mentioned, we are constantly further developing the tool and applying it in follow-up activities. So how and what can, for which purposes can we use Hotmaps? Hotmaps helps to visualize and analyze data. We can present geographically explicit data in a map, and based on this data, calculate indicators. Second, we can analyze single parts of the heating and cooling systems. There are certain calculation modules in the toolbox for doing either very quick first analysis. You will see this afterwards on district heating potentials, but then you can go into way more details by including also, uploading also your own more specific local data and carrying out and linking different calculation modules, carrying out the more detailed analysis. And based on these analysis, you can then again develop strategies, either quite fast based on this quick first analysis, or again in more detailed. Analysis can be done either actually on each regional level, but we had a certain focus on the local level in the project, on the municipality level. Hotmaps actually consists of three elements. First, a database, which stores a lot of data on buildings, heat demand, renewable energy potentials, and so on. The toolbox, which consists of a number of calculation modules. And we're also further developing and adding calculation modules in other new projects. And the wiki, which contains tutorials and training materials, handbooks, also strategic energy planning reports that have been carried out for selected cities by now. One word on the technology readiness level of the toolbox. Within the Hotmaps project, we developed the toolbox to a level of tier L7. So this means technology readiness level that is a system prototype, demonstration, and operational environment. Tier L8 would be a system complete and qualified, and tier L9 actual system proven in operational environment. And we're now starting an AeroNet project, OpenGIS for energy transition, where we have the objective to move with the Hotmaps toolbox from tier L7 to tier L8, so one step further into the real market readiness. Quick insights into the different calculations that can be done in the Hotmaps toolchain. This slide shows a number of so-called CMs. So CM stands for calculation module on different topics and how they can be linked to each other. So for example, starting with the different calculation modules on renewable energy, we can assess the renewable energy potential for in terms of solar energy, in terms of bioenergy, also in terms of waste heat potential from different sources. And then we have calculation modules which help the user to assess the current demand, either based on the default data, but also by including own data, and also to project how the demand could develop in the coming years, considering building renovation and both of these exemplary calculation modules that I picked out here, of course, have an impact then, for example, on the potential on the economic district heating potential, which can be then assessed in another calculation module. And then if we compare this economic district heating potential with different solutions for supplying this district heating and supplying decentral heating supply, we can come to a scenario assessment comparing costs and emissions for the overall city in different scenarios, and by this process develop a heating and cooling strategy. Today, I will focus strongly on these first two parts, on the inventory and potentials part. So with that, I come now to the live demonstration. That's always exciting because I will see how fast the toolbox responds. So when you open the toolbox, hotmaps.eu, you first see a large map of Europe, and on the top right, you can see different regional levels. So you can do selections either on country level, NUTS 0, or on further aggregates like NUTS 2, NUTS 3, LAU 2 is this municipality level, or even on hectare level. And you can show different layers. If you go to this symbol here on the left-hand side and show different layers in the map that you're looking at, or on the area that you're looking at. For example, heat density, total residential, non-residential, cooling densities, cross floor area, building volumes, share of cross floor area in certain building construction periods in certain vintage classes, data on industrial excess heat potentials, population density, renewable energy potentials, wastewater treatment plants, biomass, wind, solar, and also climatic data like cooling degree, heating degree, solar radiation. now how can this work? We can either zoom into the map and look for the city we're interested in, or we can directly type in here, since it's a European project. Let's type in Brussels, and we jump directly to Brussels. Maybe I will zoom out a bit. So we can see here the city of Brussels, and the corresponding heat density map, because it's by default the heat density total map is here. Is sticked here, so we can see the heat density total. And after selecting a certain area, so for example, I will go now to Brussels, to the Brussels area. So I have selected the Brussels area, but I could also select, if I go to the hectare level, I could select any area that I want with the free selection tool here. But I just, for simplicity reason, I take just Brussels, and if I load the results, I can see the total heat demand for Brussels, which is in this range of about 15 terawatt hours. So before I go into more detail, one comment on the data quality. You can imagine, of course, we have data for the whole, on hectare level, for the whole EU-27. Of course, there are uncertainties, there are inaccuracies included. We did quite some validation work, and we saw that it fits quite well in some areas, and that there are also some deviations in other areas. We have also a scientific publication on this comparison. And important for me is to note that the default data, I think, is really very helpful to do a quick first analysis. For a more detailed analysis, we need more more detailed data on the municipalities' building stock, on the structure of the building stock, and more. For me, that's important to mention. Yes. So now we have selected this area. We can also go to the calculation modules and see, okay, what can we calculate here? Here are a number of calculation modules, the ones that I mentioned before, and I choose now one which is a simpler calculation module for this purpose of the live demonstration here. It's the so-called district heating potential areas user-defined threshold calculation module. So this calculation module calculates the potential district heating areas based on user-defined thresholds in terms of minimum heat demand in hectare and in terms of total minimum heat demand in the whole district heating area. And if we run this for the case of, let's say, just a heat density of 600 megawatt hours per hectare in year, and this minimum 30 gigawatt hours per year, we get this result. Here, so we can already see which areas within Brussels might be relevant for district heating. And of course, Brussels is a densely populated area. So we see that about 95% of the Brussels heat demand could be supplied by district heating with these thresholds that we indicated. And we have also more calculation models to go into more details, for example, to calculate really economic, to do an economic assessment. So what now, coming to the exercises. In the exercises, we would like you to go through the Hotmaps toolbox and do some quick analysis. In this very first short exercise, we ask you to select a certain area and show the heat demand and resource potentials in a map. The process is described here. In the more advanced exercise, we have added more indicators that we would ask you to get out of the toolbox and also do some first analysis. So for example, this task 1.2 on the climate indicators, how does it work? You're asked to indicate average, maximum, and minimum heating and cooling degree days in this area. So let's go back to the toolbox and select as a layer the heating and cooling degree days layer. And you can see here on the right-hand side, in this indicator area, we already see the values of the average cooling degree days and the average heating degree days. Heating degree days for Brussels are around 2,500 Kelvin days. This is an important information that is of course required for heating and cooling planning, and you can put this very quickly here. And the same can be done for heating and cooling demand. Go to the toolbox, select the different layers like heat density total, residential sector, non-residential sector, cooling density, population, and so on, and enter this data, which is required for heating and cooling data, and do this for other data as well, and then do some, let's say, quick estimations and analysis. So this is the idea of the exercises. As Carsten already said before, please send the filled out documents to this email address by end of March. If you're interested in to learn more about Hotmaps, there is also the project website, the link to the wiki, which I have not shown before. So there is also a link to the wiki, and at the right top of the toolbox, there are several handbooks available, and of course also the whole open source code and data for download if you're interested in these details. Also, if you're interested in more extensive training, please contact us to receive more support or a certificate, or if you're interested in organizing an online training. So that's it from my side. And with that, I hand over back to you, Carsten and Julian.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was a quick overview of the Hotmaps tool, which can be very helpful to get like a first preview of what can be done in terms of heating and cooling planning in an area, right? And maybe as a quick question now in the end of your presentation, I will ask you maybe how reliable is the data that Hotmap uses? Maybe people wonder what is the source of the data that is used by the tool for the different functionalities.
Yeah, thanks. So some of the data is directly taken from other sources. Yeah, so for example, heating and cooling degree data. This is available also from other sources. We just prepared a link, of course, also properly referring to these other sources. In particular, for the heat demand, we did an own calculation and estimation. We set up an own model to develop this heat demand density map, combining different data sources of population density, of the soil sealing data in different periods in the past decades, data on the building stock on NUTS3 level. So different type of data was merged and combined to derive this hectare level. And we could show in a journal paper that for the case of Frankfurt and San Sebastian and Bistrica, that there is a quite good match for the overall city but there are also some deviations between different areas. And by making use of more detailed own data of the building stock, which we were able to do for these three cities as well, it's of course possible to do more detailed, more specific, also higher granular level analysis, or even on building block level then, which I think for some questions at least is also important and very relevant.
Okay, thank you. That just confirms the value and great to have that. Have these data sets also corresponding with Eurostat data and so on, public data that is here combined for a quicker advancement in the decision-making process. Maybe just one short question and then we move on, and other questions I see here in the chat, please post your questions. We will pick them up also in our Q&A session further on. Maybe one quick question is, I think Hotmaps has the potential for decision makers not only to focus on their territory, but go beyond their political boundary, so to say, in understanding quickly through the scanning exercise where are heating and cooling potentials. Therefore, also with which county neighboring municipality one should cooperate. There was a question in this regard related to that, going even further on, can the tool be extended to non-EU countries, for instance, the energy community contracting parties?
Yeah, very interesting question. I mean, all the calculation modules are independent of the territory. No? As soon as the data is available, the calculation modules can be used. So it's more a question of the data. If there is data also for a specific municipality or a region, this could also be added. And then even if we don't have the full data for a certain whole country or the whole group of energy community countries, for example.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucas. I think we can now then move to the next presentation. It's going to be about the acquisition of data for inventories in their local and regional level and analysis of potentials. This is going to be done by Adit Maya from TU Wien also. So the floor is yours, Adit.
Thank you, Julian, and good morning, everyone. So now I'll be mostly focusing on local and regional data and its importance for strategic heating and cooling planning. So in the figure here, we have seen this numerous times, the overall workflow of the ActionHeat project. And here, a central part of the entire workflow is the collection of data and development of inventory and potentials for supply of the demand, and which we were discussing just now as well, the importance of having a good database from locally available resources. And in this presentation, I'll be mostly focusing on this and identifying measures on what exact kind of data and potential sources from which these data can be acquired from in terms of demand, as well as the potential for supply, and also the emphasis of geospatial availability of data and how this could be crucial for mapping or connecting the supply and demand points in an efficient way, and also briefly an overview on potential tools that could be useful for data management and structuring and use of the collected data over the planning process. So firstly, moving on to the next slide. So firstly, as we talked about in Lucas's presentation, the approach of bottom-up data collection and top-down data collection largely can be defined based on the granularity that we intend to work in. So for instance, if we are working with on a municipality level, the data available from Hotmaps would be sufficient, I guess, for heating and cooling planning. But however, if we want to work on a more granular level, as the granularity increases, say for instance, we want to work on a hectare level or even on a building specific demand estimation and planning, heat supply planning. So in that case, there is emphasis should be given to the use of local data. And for the collection of the data itself, it largely depends on what area we're dealing with. So if we are just concerned with small isolated sublocalities, so for instance, in the poll we did in the beginning, a door-to-door data collection would be sufficient, and we could just directly go ahead with a pre-feasibility or feasibility study. But however, if we are dealing with municipality or large municipality or a alliance of municipalities, so in this case, detailed structuring and collection of data would be required. So in terms of what data we require, the figure in the middle kind of defines the dimensions in which we need to look to collect this data. So for instance, for starters, we would need a status quo on the supply resources, the building stock, and the demand. And in one direction, we should be looking towards how numerous economic or external factors affect this demand in the future, and also the level of granularity we tend to work on. So with regards to detailed planning, it would be highly recommended to work on a building level. And for this set of a general set of data that would be required would include data on the building stock and the archetypes, the gross floor areas, the heat demand, specific demands per building type, and also importantly, the current supply technology, which in most cases in Europe, the data concerning that seem to be absent. So we need to identify the current supply potentials. And for this, as local level sources could include energy suppliers. It could be based on research studies and from local regional energy ministry surveys, local energy balances, and from industries that could have potential source. But also there is this corresponding side of estimated and statistical data. But again, I would like to emphasize on the fact that if we are dealing with a detailed analysis or detailed strategic heat cool planning, then local data collection of good local data is of real importance. And moving on to the next slide. So once we have this knowledge of the status quo, the collection and structuring of the data becomes important. And as per experience and based on numerous studies, good maintenance of a energy and greenhouse gas balance sheet is seen as a good way of not just storing the data, but efficiently using it in a way such that these key parameters could be tracked over the time of the project planning as well as implementation, and to exactly see how the strategic heating and cooling process has impacted these key parameters over time. So here I have listed three potential softwares which are open source that could be used for collecting and maintaining this database. I would recommend you to have a look into these, and this could be a starting point for each municipality. I mean, I would have to say some of them are specifically designed for a particular region, and alterations would have to be made as per the area we are considering. But anyways, this could be a good starting point for a structured collection of the data. And moving on. So once we have this non-spatial side of the data, it is also quite important to have a good access or overview of the spatial distribution of these demand sources. So in that sense, we would probably need different layers of that concern the development of settlement areas, through which we are able to track the how the renovation status in buildings has developed over time, and also the end-use specific distribution of buildings, and also existing information on the existing infrastructure of heat demand locations and potential supply sources, and also the residential land density, which defines the economic feasibility of the potential networks, and also other maps which could have been identified based on other studies, including heat demand density, transportation networks, and potentially fiber optic expansion plannings and things as such would be quite important to identify the potential demand and constraints associated with its development. And potential sources here could be general local survey data, national statistics, spatial census data sets, and also scientific publications. And moving on to the next one. Yeah, so here is one particular example of how a local data has been used for bottom-up building level heat demand estimation for northern Germany. Here, the data sets on 3D building model and spatial census data, along with the building typology based on the construction period of the buildings, have been combined to develop a bottom-up grid level heat demand for heat demand densities. And this method is quite elaborate and something that could be a potential methodology that could be implemented in municipalities to generate this bottom-up building level data. And the next slide is a project that we are currently working here in Vienna regarding also the development of heat demand, but also but this is done on a building level. So we developed a calculation module where we take in input data regarding regional government GIS data, building registry data, EPC and heating system databases, and data on district grid heating and gas grid. And for this, we have for every building or every polygon defined by a particular building address, where we know the buildings data on buildings envelope, the current status of the HVAC systems, the building usage and the specific energy and the geometry of the building. And with this, we are able to generate a final layer where we have the heat demand distribution per building, which can be seen in the next slide. And so this would a particular distribution of building-based heat demand would look like. And the basic advantage of this module would be that in case there is any update to the databases, the modules can be run and a change in the demand can be observed and tracked. So in that sense, this could be like just as a reference point for every municipality aiming for strategic heating cooling planning. It would be quite good to track demand in such a manner. And moving on to the next slide, we look into the potential of supply and where these supply points are exactly located. And for this, we will probably just focus here on aspects of renewable energy that have direct potential of supplying heat to the grid networks. And this potential analysis is done based on these 4 levels of filtering, where we start with the resource or theoretical potential and narrowing it down to the technical potential based on the technology in use, the economic potential depending on the costs of operation, and the current market share. So for this, the market scenario on the technology, and for this, for each of these technologies, we would probably require some descriptive or detailed information on the potential availability of resources, which is defined in the next slide. So here we are looking into different technology. For instance, for biomass, we have this, we need the requirement of how these different potential sources of biomass are available throughout the region, including forest residues, industrial residues, and agricultural residues, and also potential energy values for these resources. And also we would require the existing status of, for instance, biogas, and what exactly is being, what is the consumption of these existing infrastructures. And also in terms of solar thermal, we would require data on the availability of rooftop areas, or any restrictions with regards to policy on its use. Or for local waste heat, we would require data on spatial distribution and of these locations and temperature levels of operation, and also other potential local waste sources such as data centers. And for waste heat treatment, the size of the wastewater treatment systems and desired level of pump size. And for other low temperature sources such as rivers and lakes, where we need temperature levels. And as data sources for this could be very region specific, but as a general overview, local, regional, city planning committees are, and also environment departments could provide a good overview of this data availability. And also technology specific associations could provide good inputs on the data. But however, taking data from associations have, as per experience, have seemed to be a bit biased, and also this factor needs to be taken into consideration while using data from biomass association. And if In particular, if you're interested in solar thermal, there is this good description from the Bavarian Ministry of Environment and Health, where they provide this detailed analysis on the methodology of evaluating solar thermal for district heating supply. So the link provided here can be referred to. And moving on to the next slide, I will provide a exclusion criteria on how to pinpoint the locations of potential sources. And this GIS-based method provides a more universal aspect, and where we use different layers acquired from different sources to track down or exclude criteria to track down the potential sources. And in this regard, we are able, if there is any just changes in the policy level, the potential re-identification of new potential areas could be quite easy and straightforward. So this is a method that could be applicable. And moving on to the next one is just an example of Zurich, where an overall spatial distribution of both supply and demand points has been implemented. And this provides a good starting point for a detailed strategic planning as well as implementation. So this should be something that this could be like a reference that municipalities should be aiming to achieve with regards to both the inventory potential, with regards to demand and supply potentials in their regions. And so finally, moving on to the next slide, I would conclude by saying that the analysis of current state of heat demand and supply would help support quantitative analysis of future heating and cooling systems, and it provides a general overview of the supply and demand and infrastructures, and also helps identify cross-sectoral opportunities and the willingness of stakeholders for collaboration and also potential assessment of risk. And so finally, just to conclude, as I began with saying that these local data are quite important, and the quality of data acquired at this stage would largely define the detail in which further planning and implementation process can be carried out. So yeah, so I would like to conclude my slide, and thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Thank you very much. And indeed, if you have any questions, please, for both speakers, post them into the chat and we will attend them. Thank you, Adit, for outlining even further the variety and the potential that Hotmaps, the open source tool Hotmaps, can bring to the table here for municipalities, but also for technical experts in particular, as I understand this tool has where we can go very much in depth, can combine bottom up and top down approaches, which is lovely here to see. Also the different, you indicated the potential for combining Hotmaps with different available tools, Bico 2BW, just to mention other tools, EcoSpeed, then tracking demand is also an interesting feature here, as well as in particular also, for instance, for coal regions in transition, for carbon intensive regions, dependent also on heat. Here, the possibility to use Hotmaps to look into the variety of different renewable energy sources here on a regional, on a sub-regional basis, on a local basis, and then also combining it with excess heat sources, that's quite encouraging. So maybe just one question here concerning your work with municipalities or analyzing municipalities. How have you undertaken that endeavor? How have you perceived municipalities? What were they in need for? What were they most interested in to get out of Hotmaps? Thank you.
Yeah. So with regards to the three case studies that Lucas mentioned for Frankfurt and San Sebastian, we were mostly looking into identifying potential locations for economically feasible locations for implementation of a heating network. And also on top of that, we look into the dispatch solutions, and with regards to supply points within the municipality, we try to identify the best possible measure for connecting the supply points with the demand. And in this case, we also looked into the feasibility of running different sensitivity scenarios on how the share or the connection rates of the district heating grid affects the economic aspects of the connection. And so these were the aspects we mostly look into. But yeah, if Lucas, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the most important point. Maybe just I think also these energy saving potentials that can be achieved. There are also quite relevant questions for some of the municipalities. So given the current state of the building stock, which energy saving potentials could be achieved with which costs also, and how do these costs relate to the costs of supplying renewable heat in order to decarbonize the system. These were, I think, the most relevant questions.
Thank you. Then I think that corresponds quite well to also the demands that municipalities here bring to the table. I think one element which we perceive, for instance, looking at Germany and here the state of Baden-Württemberg, where thermal planning is by legislation now, or is demanded by a certain size of a certain city size. So cities need to need to look into these issues. Other parts in Germany are actually, other regions are following that example, Schleswig-Holstein and others. So I think that is undertaken, and naturally, as heating and cooling is 50% of our energy demand. So we need to tackle that in order to become climate neutral. Hulin, I think there is a question in the chat.
Yes, Stefano Chiesa asks if it's possible to evaluate the potential of those areas that are not urbanized yet. There must be some administrative planning, but could you maybe Lucas or
Yeah, so if I understand the question right, it's the question if let's say areas in the city which are not yet developed, but where there are plans for developing these areas indeed that's a very relevant question when it comes to these forward-looking scenarios and strategy developments. And how we dealt with it so far was that if there are plans available, how the building structure could look like in this future area, then they could be implemented with certain demand levels, with certain profiles, user profiles, as if they would already exist in the map, and then all the calculation modules and analysis can be done as well for this area. So that's feasible. I think for me the challenge is more to get this data, or probably also possible scenarios of how to develop this certain area, and to describe it in a sufficiently concrete detail that it can be really implemented, and the heating and cooling density map can be created. But we also did that already in previous projects, and it's possible. So I think it depends also on the status where the municipality is with planning the area.
Okay, thank you. I think we are also in the next webinar to come look at the combination of Hotmaps, which gives you that overview you've just seen here in Brussels quickly, and then move into a specific area, a specific district, even street by street, which then maybe it's useful to switch to thermos. This will be explained in the next webinar, but maybe just still to add a question here in regard to the frequency of updating the data. I understood that you have established data sets, have used and combined data sets, but are now also with other projects further updating where possible, but also providing the user the possibility to update the data bottom up, so to say. Is that a correct interpretation?
Exactly. So that's a very good question on the data updating, because of course it's very data intensive, and as you said, no, we have this other ongoing projects where we are working both on the further calculation modules, but also on data aspects, and we're planning to provide updated data at the same time. The good thing is that the building stock is quite inert. Yeah. So I think it's no problem to have data which is maybe 5 years old. No? Of course, there can be areas where a lot of renovation activities are happening, or a lot of new building construction is happening, then it gets problematic. But I think this will become relevant in the coming years. But for now, I don't see it so critical. Second, I see the second question on the database for investment costs for different energy supply systems. Yes, I mean there is data available on the Hotmaps database, but there are also other very relevant and valid databases available. For example, this Danish Energy Technology Catalog is often used for this analysis, and I'm actually also not sure about thermos, because when it comes to more concrete planning, as you said, Carsten, then also thermos becomes more relevant. So I'm not sure whether thermos also includes concrete cost data for district heating systems.
We will find out. Maybe that's a good bridge for the announcement of what's coming next. But maybe before, and I actually Adit and Lucas, thank you. I would like to invite you to answer the questions still in the chat while we are proceeding in closing the webinar. But I would at the end like also here to point out one chat message which I find very interesting and promising. Here indicated by one participant here that a proposal for recast in the EED under the Fit for 55 is actually proposing to make it mandatory for local heating and cooling planning for cities by a size of 50,000 inhabitants. So that's just corresponding to, I think, the importance, but also corresponding to the need. And here, Hotmaps as a tool is available for you to use. Hulin, over to you.
Thank you, Carsten. Thank you also, Adit and Lucas, for the wonderful presentations and answering the questions now. So, and now just to end the session, I would tell you which are the next steps. So as you know, we have a third and final training session on 6 April at 10 a.m. as always, and this will be about digital tools for unlocking thermal potentials. We will talk here about the thermos tools also, and how to integrate both Hotmaps presented today and the thermos tool. So we hope to see you there. Then please, if you would like to get certified, send us your exercises by 13th of March, as indicated in the beginning. Also, you will find them in the website and the instructions there on how to send them. And finally, I'm glad to announce that the ActionHeat support facility is now open for application. You can also find it in the website under a page of call for applicants. And actually, Carsten will tell us a bit about that process now.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Hulin. If that was too complicated for you, well, try to do the short exercise, try to do the advanced exercise. Actually, it's beneficial as well for you to get into the tool, but also if you do the exercise, we know you are keen to be one of our municipalities, one of our experts that support municipalities. So we are then having a special eye on you concerning the evaluation of the calls for applications, which is open now. But also don't worry too much if you find it too complex at the beginning. There is, with this call for application, a support package offered to you with different modules now also for you to see on our website, onHeat, here available for you to scan through to get a taste of what the dedicated team here of experts brought here by the consortium partners bring to the table for your benefit. The call is open. The call is launched today for you to take a look and to apply with a deadline of the 29th of April. Here, you will lay out a little bit your interest, but also your commitment, your interest in terms, would you like to rather focus maybe at the beginning for heating and cooling transition strategy pathways to understand in its different aspects, or are you advanced already at this stage that you would like to rather investigate the feasibility of a certain network to apply that would then use our software Thermos. The selection process will be done in terms of interests, in terms of commitment, as I said, and then we will be able to provide you, if selected, then with individual or group support, depending on the focus and the demand. Eventually, that is happening and kicking off in May and June, and we foresee this application process of just being the first round. But the sooner the better you apply, the better you are also in the position to receive the support, because unfortunately, with the resources that we have, we can only support up to 120 municipalities. So be one of the first, learn with us that journey, and be supported by our expert team. I thank you very much for attending. I'm looking forward to see you again on the 6th of April at 10 a.m. Central European Time, and be punctual again, and then be inspired by another song that heats up our thoughts in preparation of the third session of the ActionHeat training webinars. So thank you all, have a good day, and talk to you soon.
Thank you everyone for a wonderful session. Thank you.